Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. In this video, let's have a discussion on the syllabus as well as the strategy that you need to study and follow respectively to answer the questions on Indian economy that are asked by UPSC in the Civil Services Mains Examination. First and foremost, understand this. By now, I'm pretty sure all of you know that the two very important stages in the UPSC examinations or civil service examinations are prelims, mains, and the third stage, which again very important, is the interview. The subject of Indian economy will be very important for you for UPSC preliminary examination as well as mains examination. In prelims, generally in the range of around 15 to 16 questions are asked every year from the Indian economy. What about the mains now? The number of questions will vary from one year to next year, first point. And second point, all the questions which are asked are not a 10 marker. Some of the questions are 15 marker questions, some of them are 10 marker questions. What are the number of questions? We'll have a look at it later. But it is suffice to say that subject of Indian economy is not only relevant for you for acing the exam at the preliminary level, it is also equally important at the mains level also. In fact, many of the times the questions or let's say the essays, the topics which are given are from the Indian economy or from relevant topics from the economics as such. So you will have to understand the subject very carefully, revise, update the current affairs and keep up to date regarding all the events that are happening, especially in the Indian economy. Now let me start with the number of questions which have been asked from this particular subject in GS paper 3. Have a look at this. In GS paper 3, there are various parts. One of the part of the paper is Indian economy. So the number of questions which have been asked will vary. It has to vary, it will vary. So on an average, it was around 6 questions from 15 to 17. Then it has gradually reduced to 5, then to 4. Then in 2021, again 5 questions were asked. Again, out of these particular 5 questions, some of them were 10 marker questions, some of them were 15 marker questions. But definitely yes, the questions on Indian economy will fall under both the heads of the number of marks, that is 10 marker as well as 15 marker. Later in the video, I'll also show you certain examples of the questions which have been asked and how you're supposed to prepare and what kind of a model answer you're supposed to write for those kind of questions. Now, before that, you need to understand what chapters you are supposed to read or what modules you are supposed to read, how much you are supposed to read to answer the questions which are asked in the mains examination. This is the list of the chapters. You will have to read National Income Aggregates, NIA, concept of GDP, GNP, NDP, NNP, national income and the per capita income. So these are the certain very important areas that you are supposed to read from the idea of or the module of national income aggregates. But is it sufficient? Absolutely no. By now, I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of this particular term, static and dynamic. The concept of static part of the subject and dynamic part of the subject. Simply, static means what is given in the textbook. Dynamic means what is there in the current affairs. For example, in the textbooks, most of the textbooks will provide you the information, lot of information regarding GDP calculation, regarding NDP, NNP, etc. But in recent times, there are certain terminologies or certain concepts related to the growth which have been discussed very often in the context of Indian economy. For example, you must have heard of V-shaped recovery, K-shaped recovery, W-shaped recovery. These are not given in the textbooks, but UPSC asks questions on these particular areas. For example, there was a question in 2021 mains. I'll show the question later. The question was on whether Indian economy is experiencing a V-shaped recovery or not. So don't say that, sir, you told us to read this, we read it, but questions were not asked from these particular chapters. Because the UPSC will not just focus on what is given in the textbook. UPSC will also ask you whether are you reading the current affairs And if yes, are you able to apply what knowledge you have garnered or gathered from the textbook in the current affairs? That is the reason there are terminologies such as recovery, shaped recoveries. There are also concepts such as counter-cyclical and pro-cyclical fiscal policies, which are very important in the context of Indian economy. So apart from studying static portion, you are also expected to read current affairs, update your current affairs, keep your knowledge up to date. Questions have been asked and they will be asked in the GS paper 3 from the Indian economy area. Second, concept of inflation. Within inflation, what is important for mains subject or mains area? You are expected to understand what factors can cause inflation. What measures are there of inflation in India? WPI, CPI, GDP deflator, etc. What is the role of RBI, Reserve Bank of India, in controlling inflation? How does RBI use its tools, that is monetary policy tools or credit control measures, to control inflation? What kind of measures have been used recently by RBI? What have been the causes of inflation in the recent times in the Indian economy? If there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, can that cause inflation in the Indian economy? You should be able to explain it. Because a question like this, let's say, inflation in India cannot be caused only by the internal factors, can also be an outcome of external factors. Elaborate. If a question of this nature is given, you cannot expect a book to give an answer to this. But if you have read the textbook and if you have also read what is happening in the current affairs, trust me, you will be able to answer these kind of questions. For example, what does the question expect from you? The question is saying that inflation in India can be caused not only because of the domestic factors, but also because of foreign factors, external factors. For example, let me give a very simple example here. We import a lot of fertilizers. We import a lot of crude oil into India. We import a lot of raw materials into India, a lot of commodities into India. And because of the war that is happening between Russia and Ukraine, if the prices of these commodities will rise up, prices of steel rises up, prices of crude oil rises up, which has actually happened, don't you think because of the rising prices of these products, the imports cost will increase? And when the import cost will increase, automatically it will have an impact on inflation. Now, what is inflation? First, you need to learn that. Only then you will understand how these external factors can also have an impact on inflation in the domestic market. So, you need to understand the static portion of this, then apply it in the current affairs. That is the basic idea of inflation. Then there is also a concept of taxation. Within taxation, what generally is focused in the UPSC examination? In the budget, if Government of India has announced certain measures in taxation system, for example, Government of India might simply say, we are restructuring the concept of capital gains tax. Then UPSC will ask you what reforms have been announced. What do you mean by capital gains tax? Explain it to me. If Government of India has announced any changes in, let's say, corporate tax law, for example, 2 years ago, Government of India, again either 2 years, 3 years, don't worry, 2 or 3 years ago, Government of India reduced the corporate tax rate from 30% to 22% in India. UPSC so far has not asked a question on this. Can UPSC ask a question? Of course, yes. Kind of a question that could be asked is, example, have a look at this. The corporate tax rate, no doubt, reduced will have an impact, will promote industrialization in the Indian economy, but also has certain financial implications. Elaborate. Or else another kind of a question, critically evaluate the decision of Government of India to reduce the corporate tax rate from 30% to 22%. In that case, you are expected to write what are the positive aspects why Government of India reduced it. If they have reduced, what is the impact of it? What is the impact of this particular reduction in the corporate tax rate? Or else another example under taxation, best example is GST, Goods and Services Tax. You will have to understand everything related to GST, again keeping in mind the requirement of UPSC. Don't mug up the calculations in UPSC. Don't mug up which documents you need to submit, which office you will have to go. No, that is not the requirement of UPSC. When I say you will have to learn everything about GST, you need to understand why GST was implemented. Why did we basically discontinue the earlier indirect taxation structure and introduce a revolutionary reform in the form of GST? If so, has GST lived up to its reputation? We wanted to achieve A, B and C when we started discussing GST. After so many years, that is more than 5 years, Did we achieve all of this? You will have to understand that. A kind of question this UPSC can ask on this area is, take an example. The government of India is yet to make GST a good and a simple tax. Critically evaluate the GST structure in India. Although GST has a certain very important positive outcomes, there are certain issues plaguing the effectiveness of GST. Elaborate. In fact, questions on GST have been asked in the last couple of years. That is the reason taxation becomes very, very important. Again, I am saying, in UPSC Mains Examination, especially for Indian economy, do not expect that the questions will be picked up directly from the book. Absolutely no. UPSC will focus a lot on current affairs. He will ask you the application part of Indian economy. Then the concept of banking, Reserve Bank of India and non-banking financial companies. Questions can be asked from this particular chapter. For example, he might ask you, explain the role of RBI in controlling inflation. RBI is referred to the banker to the government. Why? Explain. What are the important tools used by RBI under the credit control measures? Explain or discuss. What is Monetary Policy Framework Agreement? Discuss. What are the important recommendations of Bimal Jalan Committee? And write a note on the issue of distribution of surplus reserves between the government as well as the RBI. Discuss. Cooperative banking structure in India, though very important, suffers from certain lacuna or certain issues. Elaborate. These are the kind of questions which UPSC can ask you from this particular chapter of banking, RBI and NBFC. But having said so, for whatever reason, in the last couple of years, questions from this area have not been asked by UPSC. From the chapter of banking, questions have not been asked by UPSC. But definitely, as chapter is important, questions can be asked by UPSC. Then there is a concept of the budgeting of the government, finance commission, etc. In fact, UPSC in the last couple of years has asked questions such as, what is gender budgeting? Elaborate the concept of gender budgeting. It is a part of budgeting concept under the government. Write a note on the accounts in the budget. There are receipts, there are expenditures, there is a capital side of the budget, there is a revenue side of the budget. You are expected to write a note on that. Then there can be a question on the 15th Finance Commission. Mention the, or let's say discuss the important recommendations of 15th Finance Commission. Can also be a question by UPSC. Or they might simply ask you, the 15th Finance Commission is revolutionary in its approach. Write a note, elaborate on this. Why it is revolutionary? For a very simple reason. 15th Finance Commission has given multiple recommendations going beyond what generally the Finance Commission recommend. Then there is a concept of planning. In planning, there are multiple 5-year plans which have been implemented. 5-year plans started in 1951. Before 1951, in 1950, we set up Planning Commission. Then in 1952, we set up NDC, National Development Council. Now you are expected to understand all these particular aspects. A question has already been asked. Have a look at the question. Differentiate between the functioning of Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. Because from 2015, 1st January 2015, Government of India set up a new authority. It abolished earlier authority, Planning Commission, set up a new authority, National Institution for Transforming India. One question has already been asked by UPSC. Compare and contrast between the Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. So far, in the last couple of years, questions on the nature of, let's say, evaluation of the performance of Niti Aayog has not been asked. What has been the achievement of Niti Aayog? Not asked. What has been the evaluation of 60 plus years of planning in India? Not asked. These kind of questions in the last couple of years have not come. So you will have to be very careful, understand all the important aspects related to this. Then the concept of international trade. Under international trade, you will come across the balance of payments, the current account, capital account. You will come across exchange rates. You will come across a concept of integration, economic integration, under which Government of India has been signing multiple agreements with multiple countries. Having said so, should you read only this much and stop? Again, my answer will be no. absolutely and a very big no. Why? UPSC will not ask you the static portion only. For example, look at a kind of question which can be asked by UPSC. Write a note on economic integration. Also, discuss the reasons why Government of India refused to join RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Can be a very potential question in the UPSC mains. Or else, another note or another question. Write a note on the factors which affect exchange rates. You will have to write the factors which are internal in nature as well as external in nature. Or else, another type of question. Write a note on the recent reforms that have been taken by the Government of India to promote exports from India. For example, Government of India last 5 years has announced MEIS, Merchandise Exports from India scheme, Service Exports from India scheme, remission of duties on export products. There are a lot of schemes. You will have to remember at least, let's say, 5 to 6 schemes. Write a note on all of these particular schemes in order to meet, let's say, the criteria of 250 words. Apart from this, a kind of question that can be asked, right, will be related to service exports from India or merchandise exports from India or the exchange rate evolution in India, etc. Then there is agriculture sector, important for both prelims as well as mains. Agriculture sector questions have come from this particular area generally in both the examination or both the levels of examination, both in prelims as well as in mains. For example, in case of mains, questions have been asked on the concept of MSP, minimum support price. And in recent times, there are a lot of aspects which are being discussed in the context of MSP. For example, look at the kind of question which can be asked by UPSC in the coming days. MSP, there is a demand for providing a legal backing to this. Critically evaluate the decision. Or should Government of India go for giving a legal backing for MSP? Write your viewpoint. Evaluate this particular idea. You will have to write what can be achieved with legal backing to MSP. What are the issues related to legal backing to MSP? And what is the way forward? Apart from this, a kind of question from agriculture sector has been from food processing industry. There have been questions, example, what reforms have been taken by Government of India within food processing? Elaborate. What issues are faced by food processing sector in India? Elaborate. Questions have been asked. And again, in coming days also, lot of reforms will be taken. Lot of discussion will keep on happening related to food processing. It is as such very, very important. So this is the area of agriculture. Then there is the industry and services. For example, in case of India, right, have a look at this. The service sector has boomed, especially post 1991. Reason is very simple. From 1991, we have implemented reforms by the name of LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. And because of that, the service sector has actually ballooned or has grown at a very, very fast pace in India. Having said that, doesn't mean that before 1991 there was no growth in services. There was growth in services even before 1991. But because of those reforms, the growth in the industrialization as well as service sector has ballooned, has basically exploded in India. Question can be asked on this. For example, what are the reasons which have contributed to the growth of service sector in India? Elaborate. What reforms have been taken by the government in recent times to promote a services sector? Elaborate. What is MSME? Write a note on the importance of MSMEs and the issues faced by them. What are the reforms undertaken by the Government of India in the last couple of years to promote MSME sector? How industrial policies have played a very important role in growth of the public sector enterprises as well as private sector in India? Elaborate. Write a note on Startup India. Critically evaluate Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative of the Government of India. Make in India, though has very good initiative or has very good objectives, is yet to meet the targets which are set up by the government. Write reasons, explain the reasons, etc. These are the kind of questions which can be asked from the concept of industries as well as services. Then there is investment models. There is special economic zones. There is a concept of a PPP, public-private partnership. Then there is a FDI, foreign direct investment, foreign institutional investors. In fact, questions have been asked by UPSC in the mains paper from this chapter. For example, they had asked a question, although there are multiple FDI agreements which are signed between the private sector company and the government, many of them are not actually implemented. What do you think are reasons? Give way forward. FDI is required. What reforms have been taken by the government? Write a note. The PPP, public-private partnership, what is the requirement of it? And what are the issues faced by PPP in India? Write a note on it. Yes, easy, special economic zone, very essential for various reasons in case of Indian economy. What are the issues faced by it? Recommend a way forward. These kind of questions have already been asked by UPSC, and if there is any discussion related to these particular models in the current affairs, please focus on that. I'll give a very simple example. Government of India very recently in the budget stated that we want to restructure the policy of special economic zones. We want to restructure the policy of special economic zones. So obviously questions can be asked from this particular area. Then there is an infrastructure chapter. What is infrastructure? What are the issues being faced by the infrastructure in India? What do you mean by long-term funders, or let's say financiers in infrastructure? What is the development of finance initiative, or let's say institution? What is the importance of NABFID in developing infrastructure in India? If you promote development of infrastructure, what kind of objectives can be met? And what are the different areas in the infrastructure? Power. Other example is port area, Sagarmala initiative, airports, Udan initiative, etc. Or waterways, Inland Waterways Authority of India, Government of India proposing 111 national waterways. So questions can be asked from various areas from this. Please read, update from the current affairs. Then there is a chapter on inclusive growth. Generally questions on inclusive growth have been asked in mains. And inclusive growth, most of the books that you refer to, or any book that you are going to refer to, will give you very small amount of information about inclusive growth. Having said, the concept of inclusive growth is very larger concept. It's not a very small concept. Because whatever we have discussed so far in the economy, for example, if you talk about growth, if you talk about industrialization, agriculture sector, banking sector, all of them one or the other way will have a connection with inclusive growth. So you need to connect all of these particular dots, only then you will be able to answer questions related to inclusive growth. For example, last year the question in the UPSC mains was, there is a need to invest in infrastructure in order to achieve inclusive growth. Elaborate. So many students looked at the question and said, sir, what is the connection between infrastructure and inclusive growth? There is a very close linkage. For example, Government of India spends in development of agriculture markets. Government will spend money on development and providing housing for the poor people, constructs schools, develops hospitals, constructs and develops other types of infrastructure. Don't you think all of them will provide benefit to the poor sections? Definitely yes, that will promote inclusive growth. So these are the kind of questions which can be asked, which have been in fact asked in many of these particular chapters. And these are the important chapters that you are supposed to read for UPSC Civil Service Examination mains paper on Indian economy. Now, what are the references? Use one static book, any book. One static reference is more than sufficient. Do not use multiple books for studying the static portion. Very wrong approach. One book more than sufficient. But what I would recommend to you people is, be aware of current affairs. If you are aware of current affairs, most of the questions in Indian economy paper you will be able to solve either in the prelims as well as in the mains. So you'll have to read newspapers, you'll have to read magazines, you're expected to understand the budget as well as economic survey proposals or concepts therein. So read, make notes, revise, keep on revising. That is the right approach that you need to follow for this particular mains paper as such. Now, before I go forward and show you certain sample questions, these are certain very important pointers. One, do not be dependent only on the static information that you have. Update the current affairs. Now, once you update the current affairs, it is not just sufficient to read current affairs, it is equally important to revise current affairs. Keep on revising. Third, descriptive answer writing practice. Answer writing practice is a must for you. Either you talk about preliminary papers or mains paper. In preliminary, have test practice there, and in mains, descriptive answer writing is a must. You cannot escape from it. Do not assume that in the last 1 month, last 15 days, I will practice answer writing. No, you will have to practice a lot of questions even before you start going for preliminary examination. Even before you go to the center in preliminary examination, before that itself, you should have sufficient practice of writing mains based papers. Take the questions from the previous years and have a practice of writing there. Right, so these are certain very important pointers I want to mention before showing you the sample questions. This is one sample question which was asked in the last year. Explain the difference between the computing methodology of India's GDP before the year 2015 and after 2015. Again, I will not write the model answer here. I'll just give you what you're supposed to do here. Whenever you discuss the concept of GDP under national income aggregates, before 2015, Government of India, or to be more precise, authority NSO, used to have a different practice of calculating GDP, and after 2015, methodology has been changed. The question is on that. What was the methodology we followed before 2015? What is the methodology after 2015? Write an introduction. Within the main body, what are the important changes which were introduced? Write a note on that, and then conclude by saying, these are the reasons why Government of India shifted to a new methodology, which is a better measure of calculating the growth in value as well as the volume added to the economy. That is basically what is expected from you in 250 words. Another question here. Explain the rationale behind GST Compensation Act of 2017. How has COVID-19 impacted GST compensation fund and created new federal tensions? Two aspects to this particular question. One, what is the rationale? Why did we introduce a GST? Let me start with that. GST has been introduced for multiple reasons or in order to achieve multiple objectives. For example, now I will be using certain technical terms. If you don't understand, don't worry. Don't enter into panic now because you have not yet started, I believe, reading this particular subject. Don't worry. GST was introduced in order to promote ease of doing business, in order to promote elimination of cascading effect, in order to promote the concept of one tax, one national market, in order to consolidate indirect taxation structure in India, in order to provide benefit to logistics sector, manufacturing sector, etc. Second part of the question, how has COVID-19 affected the GST compensation? Because of COVID-19, the GST revenue collection was affected, and as a result of this, the tensions between the center and the state grew. Right? There were frictions between the central government as well as state government. That is what they are talking about. Done? So these are the two sample questions. Again, 250 words. You don't have to write beyond that. Try to stick to this particular 250 word limit. Having said so, you will have to have a lot of practice to answer these kind of questions. You cannot do it within 10 days. You cannot do it within 15 days. You will have to have very long-term practice. Keep on practicing answer writing over a period of time. You will get mastery over it. Done? So in a nutshell, what we have discussed, number of questions which are asked, on an average around 5 questions will come under 10 markers as well as a 15 marker questions. The syllabus is there, although in the GS paper, the syllabus is given. I have covered more than what is actually prescribed in the syllabus given in the UPSC notification. Then what are the references for static as well as the dynamic? Then the kind of sample questions or the kind of questions which have been asked by UPSC in the last couple of years in the GS paper 3 on Indian economy. So these are the various aspects I just wanted to discuss and brief you about the strategy as well as the syllabus for GS paper 3 on Indian economy in the Civil Services Examination. Thank you. Have a great day.